G'day everyone, Gooba here with another Torchlight Infinite Outlaw Season video. I'm just going to read out the Crow's Corner Episode 1 from the Outlaw Season. I understand that not everyone likes reading an absolute wall of text, so I will just go through and read them. And yeah, I haven't read through any of these yet, so I don't know what the questions are, and I might just give a little bit of feedback personally on each of the answers that are given. So question 1 says, why was the decision made to make this season so difficult? The most difficult in years. The company remained at the same level. Weird. Campaign, maybe, remained at the same level, and the maps from tier 0 to tier 5 were played in the usual difficulty. But starting from tier 7 and beyond, the game began to suffocate. At the start of the league, Ember did not drop at all, making it difficult to craft. Okay. Will the following seasons remain as difficult? Question 2. Since SS9, nearly everything feels deliberately slowed down. I think that was meant to be maybe SS7 or 8. Ember and Beacon drops got nerfed. Farming now feels unrewarding. New league mechanic is tedious, with long upgrade gates and slow access to tower heist. I agree with that. Crafting weights nerfed, making targeted crafting almost impossible without absurd cost. Builds heavily nerfed, yet players still struggle to access Profound. I thought they were complaining at the start. Economy changes make even basic progression feel punishing. The community agrees. This isn't engaging a difficulty, it's artificial grind. It's an artificial grind. At these rates, almost nobody will realistically farm for the rewards, which kills the fun of the game. Alrighty, the answer to question 1 and 2. Thank you for the detailed and honest feedback. We would like to address feedback regarding TLI's current difficulty. Our goal for the Outlaw season was to create a challenging, high investment, high reward mechanic for well fleshed out builds. However, we recognise that at launch the rewards did not match the difficulty and the barrier to entry was too high. We've already rolled out several adjustments to increase the rewards and make the content more worthwhile for the majority of players. That said, we agree there are some core design issues we need to solve better in the future. The invulnerability, enemies, and all for nothing when the timer runs out can be frustrating. That was very frustrating at the start because the invulnerability lasted too long, so if you didn't get all of them immediately, you just failed. So that sucked. So that should have been better handled from the PTR. And we're looking at smarter ways to handle mechanics like these. Make them small and faster and more clumped in. Who cares if some builds excel at that? Make it accessible to everyone. Duh. This season has been a learning experience for us. Hope every season is a learning experience for them so they keep improving, to be honest. A key takeaway is that the skill floor for the seasonal content was too high, creating too wide a gap between different levels of players. We've learned that seasonal mechanics need to be more accessible at a baseline level, and this is something we'll be paying very close attention to in the design of all future seasons. Good. I mean, it's a very political answer. We stuffed up at the start, we made some adjustments, hopefully we do better in the future. That's what that all says. Question 3. The status effects in Deep Space feel overwhelmingly strong. Did you play last season? They were horrendous. Do you have any plans to adjust or reduce their impact? The difficulty feels too high this time. It was pretty high last time. I would appreciate it if it could be a bit easier in the next update. I agree with this. I'll read the answer in a second. But I always felt like you should be able to get to the end game without end game like min-maxed gear. I feel like you should be able to grind in the highest difficulty and then min-max your gear. Anyway, we agree that the elements in Deep Space are currently too punishing. We don't plan to nerf the base difficulty of the content itself, but we are going to make ailment countering Stats more accessible for players to build around. They actually did that this season. It was harder last season. We also agree that the overall difficulty is too high for many right now, and confirm that we'll be making adjustments in the future updates. Thank you for the feedback. An interesting part of this is it's similar to the Supreme Showdown 20. In TorchCon, they showed that only 1.5% of players had beaten SS20 to date. So that's pretty interesting. Question 4. Are you going to address the amount of loading screens between each interaction? After finishing a map, going back to town, starting a new map, getting inside, there are over 10 loading screens. If you're doing a mechanic at the end of the map, that's another 2 or 3. Most of those black screens are redundant and can be removed. Much the inventory changed to be as an overlay rather than an additional load screen. English hard. Most of those can also work as overlays. Doing cube at the end, just have the cube auto roll somewhere top right. There's no need for new windows. Click convert or any of it. Okay. In treasure troves, you have the option to exit or go again. After finishing the map, there should be an option to go next. I 100% agree. This was in my video as well. Next map in the certain confusion card chain, removing at least 8 load screens. I agree. That's also in mine. At the moment, the most friction I'm feeling, and the reason I quit every league, is fatigue due to so much unnecessary load time. Load screens, click, click, click. I just want to kill monsters, not click on the UI. That's how I feel about Path of Exile, to be honest. I'm almost sick of it before the end of Act 1. First, the good news. We agree with you about loading screens. They are disruptive, and we are already planning to remove as many of them to create a much smoother transition between gameplay areas. Regarding your suggestion for a Go Next button for continuous mapping, this topic we have explored and even built internal prototypes for. Our findings, however, were surprising. While continuous mapping seems faster on paper, our internal playtests show that actually led to a greater sense of burnout and fatigue over long sessions. I don't know how. I honestly don't see how. You should just do it for the group of the 4 confusion cards, and then go back to town and do that again. The brief pause in town, while currently burdened by too many clicks, served as an unintentional but necessary mental reset between maps. Just do it every 4. Every set of confusion cards. I'd rather run maps for 4 minutes, have a 1 or 30-second break, and then run another 4. Anyway. Because of this, we have decided not to implement a continuous mapping feature at this time. We know this is a very subjective area of the game design, and that our conclusion might be controversial. Our goal here is to be honest with you about our process and what we've learned. At least they tested it, but, you know, maybe they didn't have the right idea in mind, and they just went, you know, continuous forever, and that wasn't a very good idea. Because just like everything in life, you need some breaks. Question 5. This season we had only seen a massive nerf across all stats, talents, candles, skill level, effectiveness, slate modifiers. These were supposed to be an offset by the tower sequence, but it costs too much to use, and normal players would not be able to even use the advanced sequence mods. What was the intention to nerf so many different attributes of the game for the players? Do not make monsters that run away from players. Very unintuitive and unfun. Stop nerfing all content. Answer. Our original intention was to rebalance the game. We reduced some sources of stats that were overperforming, but we also lowered the difficulty of maps. Did you? Did you really? I don't think you did. However, this happened at the same time that we tightened some drop rates and nerfed certain mechanics. The combination of all these changes at once resulted in the game feeling grindier than we hoped for, which was never our goal. To be blunt, we agree that the current experience may be too punishing for certain players. Everyone's stuck in time mark 7. We are going to correct this in upcoming updates. We'll be loosening the reins by increasing certain drop rates and looking for opportunities to buff player build strength to bring the fun back to the forefront. This also extends this to specific game design. We agree that mechanics like monsters that constantly run away or are temporarily invulnerable are frustrating. As we mentioned in a previous answer, this season has taught us a valuable lesson about keeping our core content fun and accessible, and we are committed to using more enjoyable designs in the future. Question 6. Hi, just wondering what the reasoning was for Ember drop rate nerfs. I wasn't too phased by this. Blah, blah, blah. More Ember. Yeah. Let's try to address everything one by one. On Ember drop rates, our goal was to create a more self-regulating economy for Embers by shifting the supply away from generic world drops. However, we miscalculated. The market price for Embers rose higher than we anticipated, and the God of Might mechanic wasn't enough to balance it out. That's because God of Might generally sucks, so no one does it. If 50% of the player base were doing God of Might, then, you know, it wouldn't have been a problem. But God of Might itself is a highly damaging, highly average mechanic without incredibly expensive compasses. Anyway, rant over. This contributed to the overly grindy feeling we mentioned in another answer. It's something we are currently active working on. On challenging bosses, we understand the frustration of dying to a sudden high damage attack. While we don't have plans to remove those challenging bosses, we recognize that players need better tools to deal with them. Our philosophy is to empower players to overcome challenges, not to remove challenges entirely. To that end, we'll be focusing on making defensive stats and survival options smoother and more cost-effective to build into your gear. I guess I went blah 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 when they mentioned that. Nope. Oh, okay, that was just that. More transparency on nerfs. Transparency on nerfs. We always strive to be comprehensive in our patch notes. However, sometimes these changes may not be as comprehensive as necessary. We are committed to improving our process to ensure we have a clear understanding of all changes. In addition to our official patch notes, we also want to shout out the amazing work done by TLI DB, which can be a great place to get detailed stat breakdowns. I think one of the major issues here is the way that it seems, from what the very limited exposure that I've had, is the explanations and stuff that the Chinese community get are very different to how the West see problems and fixes. So I think it's a bit of a translation and implied knowledge that comes across that is at work here. So I'm sure they'll get better as the seasons go on. Question 7. I would like to know if the T1 craft on priceless items will be changed one day. I find it hellish that T1 is so complicated to reach. Personally, I often stop the season because sometimes I will do 25 tries for a T1 stat. It's a 1% chance, so it should be 1 in 100. Anyway, I'll keep reading. I think it's a 1% chance, isn't it? Even worse, when the season like Outlaw, the craft materials are very expensive. I understand for tier 0, but tier 1 poses a big problem. I think when I see myself struggling to craft tier 1s on priceless gear, when I have 250 hours of play in 2 weeks over the season, I can't even imagine for people who play less. I don't really see the point of making tier 1s so complicated to get. I literally made 46 tries for a T1 element on guns and the ultimate amber at 50 FE. So 80 FE per roll. This is the only only an example, it's practically always like that. I would like the T1 to be much easier to get on priceless ones. Even if the craft is more expensive at the limit, it would make the craft much healthier for people that play much during the season. Personally, I kind of agree, but it's a hell of a lot easier than it used to be. It could still improve though, obviously. First, let us say we understand your frustration completely. Even our own internal team feels that same dismay when bad luck strikes during crafting. That said, the probability of hitting a tier 1 affixes is a fundamental pillar of the endgame itemization and trading economy. Adjusting it is as a very significant change with wide-reaching effects on the item value and overall market. For this reason, we are approaching this system with extreme caution and have no immediate plans to adjust tier 1 crafting rates. This does not mean the conversation is over. We will continue to monitor crafting data and community sentiment on this subject. Feedback like yours is crucial for our long-term decisions, and we sincerely appreciate your time for taking to write this out, or something like that. So I agree with that. I think if the drop rate of the ultimate embers and stuff like that were higher, so pretty much towards the end of the season, ultimate embers come down to about 5-10 flame elementium, and that's much more reasonable for a crafting perspective. But at the moment where ultimate embers are 40 or 50 flame elementium, that's obscene. So if you translate that to later in the season, you get about 10 attempts for every 1 attempt right now. So crafting at the moment, while I guess it's sad because a lot of players are still playing, the cost of crafting is a lot higher. There's more competition for those materials, and it is a player-driven economy. So everything is based around supply and demand. I just think there maybe should be a little bit more supply of ultimate embers, and they are bringing out bound FE a lot more now than it used to be. So I think they're going in the right direction. It's just the supply and demand at the moment is a little bit whack. You'll notice in a couple of weeks when ultimate embers come down in price, it'll be much more reasonable to craft tier 0 or tier 1 priceless and stuff like that. Is it your intention to make League mechanics not drop such generic loot and instead hyper-focus on their own unique drops? Examples of this are such as Snow dropping a lot less common rewards, FE div cards, and the money being pushed to alt gems. Same thing for something such as Might, which previously used to be a steady income of embers in profit. Now it turned to an ultimate ember gamble. Machines is this way too, previously providing steady income of div cards ranging from 100 to 200 FE, now devolved into ultimate gamble and hoping to dupe some godly card, which you won't see for another 200 maps. This is further amplified by the removal of lower tier scarabs, causing mechanics to not have the midway point between investment and 100 FE a map, which is not fun as a player. Not everyone wants to gamble 100 FE per map. Especially since early on it takes you you get 500 FE an hour, for an example. It is nice to specialize and spend currency for bonus rewards without needing to fork out cash for 10 maps and hoping to hit the big return. Some mechanics do this fine, such as Cube, but we need more mid-tier compasses and available strategies for the things such as Clockwork, Machines, Might, and Dark Surge. Everything being a gamble is not fun, I agree. You want something you know you can fall back to get some consistent currency without with maybe a chance at big hits. All or nothing is not fun, which takes over too many mechanics. I need to learn to read better. Our core design principle is to engage a diverse endgame where multiple farming strategies are viable and valuable. You are correct that we have intentionally shifted some mechanics to have more unique, specialized rewards. I think that's against what he just said, isn't it? So in the questions, they said, why have you gone away from God of Might being about embers, God of Machines being about div cards, and made them too generic? And then the answer is our core design principle is to encourage diverse endgame where multiple farming strategies are viable and valuable. You are correct that we have intentionally shifted some mechanics away. It's literally the opposite to what he said. The reason for this is simple. If all mechanics simply dropped a generic currency, the meta would quickly devolve into figuring out which single activity was the highest FE per hour. That's my videos. And many players would feel forced to do only that, even if they didn't enjoy it. That's true. By having mechanics drop their own unique rewards, it creates a more dynamic economy. It encourages players to engage with the content that their build is best at, or that they simply find most fun. Because their specialized loot will always have value to other players. That being said, you have raised an extremely important point where we feel there is room for improvement. Providing more reliable, constant output, mid-tier farming strategies. We are approaching this carefully because we need to balance the experience across all levels of play. Here's an idea. If you want to nerf the Eterna Ruins farm, don't do it twice. So they made Eterna harder by a factor of about 10, and then they halved the amounts of enemies that spawned in there. So it was harder for less loot. Do one or the other. Don't. It's like my brother always says, if you're going to nerf something, nerf one thing. Don't nerf two things, don't nerf three things. Because if you nerf two things, it's not two things, it's you've nerfed one thing multiplied by the second thing. And if you do three things, it's you've nerfed the first thing multiplied by the second thing multiplied by the third thing. So it's not a 3 times nerf, it's more like a 9 times nerf or something like that. So the way you aggressively nerf things is wrong. Simple nerfs. With the recent addition of Sandlord to the base game, the same problem that has cropped up in Path of Exile has surfaced in this game. It kind of becomes mandatory to do an extra passive activity, seeing that this mechanic requires one of your void charts to effectively farm it. Are you open to adding more void chart trees in the future to ameliorate this problem? Alleviate this problem? I think that's meant to say alleviate. Additionally, since this is something that will keep worsening over time with the game accumulating new mechanics every season, not year, do you have any long-term solution being planned? They actually mentioned this at the end of last season, where they said that they would start rotating in and out mechanics. I think one of the main problems with Sandlord is up to level 5, the wage cost is quite reasonable. Then when you go to 6, it times by 8 or something like that. And then level 7, it times by about 10. So if you're playing Sandlord, just keep all your guys at level 5, and then you only need to play it for about an hour every month. But anyway. On Sandlord going core, our goal was, when adding Sandlord to the core game, was for it to be compelling optional strategy, not something players feel as a mandatory chore. We've been looking at our internal data on this, and it shows that players who choose to fully specialize in other endgame strategies and ignore Sandlord altogether are achieving comparable returns to those who invest heavily in the Sandlord mechanic. Our long-term system bloat. Alrighty, next up is long-term system bloat. You're absolutely right to ask the long-term plan. As we add more content to the season, more content season after season, the complexity and system bloat can be a serious problem for new and veteran players alike. This is a topic that we have been discussing for some time, both internally and with the community. The most likely long-term solution that we are considering is a system of rotating past season mechanics in and out of the core game each season. This would be a massive change to the core game, and it involves many complex factors. From game balance and player progression, we want to be absolutely sure we get it right before we can commit. Therefore, while it is under serious consideration, we have not made a final decision yet. Question 10. I'd like to ask about the balance of item enhancements, enchantments in the season's content. In the previous season, the blending rituals system offered various enchantments on belts, and the one that granted an additional hero trait was particularly attractive. However, the system has now been removed, has it? And it became something like Pedigree of the Gods. Was that blending removed? So it was. So the heroic sacrifice blending was taken away. There you go. I didn't even notice. Back to it. Oops, where is it? Okay. My assumption is that the previous enchantment may have granted too much power to certain characters, leading to its overall removal. That said, the current pool of available enchantments feels a bit underwhelming by comparison. The one I'm using is not, but okay. That being said, enchantments this season offer extremely high offensive power, in best cases providing around 100% more damage, which is a significant jump compared to 10 to 22% more damage typically granted by a single enchantment back in Nightmare Season. Whether it's previous season's hero trait or this season's more damage-based enchantments, both seem extremely strong. So I have a few questions. Long intro. Are there plans to nerf the season's enchantments as well? Or is this high power enchanting trend something you plan to continue going forward? For context, I had leveled up the previous seasonal pet to 6 last season, and honestly I was quite disappointed to see how drastically the blending ritual enhancement system changed. Looking forward to your thoughts. And the answer. Our approach to introduce a unique, intentionally powerful progression system. Let me try that again. Our approach is to introduce a unique, intentionally powerful progression system with each new season. This is done to make every season feel fresh, exciting, and distinct from the last. Last season's blending rituals and this season's high damage tower sequence enchantments are both examples of this philosophy in action. Remember when they added hero memories? That was a huge addition. However, you are right to the question, the long-term trend. If we allowed this power level to inflate season after season, the game's balance would quickly become uncontrollable. That's why they nerf everything, to make it not feel so bad. Therefore, our model is to retire or significantly retune these overpowered seasonal systems at the end of every season. The problem with this is you get to about 15 trillion DPS in the previous season, they add a new mechanic, and you just have to use all the previous mechanics and the new mechanic to get to 15 trillion DPS. So it's just adding an extra level of complexity to reach the same spot. When a seasonal system is added to the core game, it is always rebalanced to a baseline power level that is consistent with other core endgame mechanics. This ensures that a healthy place in the game long term without invalidating other choices. It is a difficult trade-off between keeping the game excitingly different each season and providing long-term system stability. Be interesting if they just added a new season where there was new farming strategies, you know, something like that. Alright, question 11. Anything being worked on to explain different endgame mechanics better? I find it confusing with so many vendors and upgrade options. Answer: as the game grows, the number of systems can become overwhelming. Improving the in-game explanations and all of the endgame mechanics is a huge and detailed task, but it is a necessary one. For example, one of our current projects to improve the clarity of how different pack spirits effects work and are displayed in in-game UI. A similar process will be carried out on all other mechanics as part of an overall UI revamp. If you want to check out pack spirits, just look at my video that I put out the other day. Anywho, crafting costs yet again seems to be out of touch, that you'll need to run absolutely brain rot farm strats to get even tier 1 gear. Is there any plans to not hate players not capable to run profound on day 2? Thanks. This is a recurring question in this Crow's Corner. We've touched on it above. To summarize, we'll be scaling back things difficulty-wise and increasing certain drops, blah, blah, blah. Yep. Will path of progression be reworked? Not only can we not tell where our talent points are in the path of progression, but some things required is just ridiculous. Will you let us click into higher phases to see the rewards? I think that'd be a fantastic idea. Answer: while we don't have plans for a complete system redesign at the moment, we absolutely agree with you that some of the objectives seem unreasonable. We are reviewing the system and adjusting the specific overall difficulties to make them more reasonable for players to complete. I think one of the questions that he just asked was... oh, it was in there, wasn't it? See these? Oh, that's what I need to do to get XP. Oh, that's what I need to do to get drop quant. That's what I need to do to get ember drop quant. That's what I need to do to get flame fuel drop quant. Where's the one for skills? Where's the one for void chart points? There needs to be 2 more buttons there so you can easily click on them and go, oh, I need to get loot to... no, that's a bad example because that's all flame fuel. Hero memories. Oh, this is where you get XP. Gear. This is where you get some ember drop quant. Journey. Oh, this is where you get the void chart points. At the start, I think you get some talent points. You know? Just add these to these little menus here, and that would alleviate a lot of the problems. Some stuff like this, Trial of Divinity Floor 20, that's a big pain in the ass. This one seems reasonable-ish. Level 2 alert. I haven't done City Defense at all. I don't know why that's completed. But anyway. Question 14. Hi, TLI. Love the game. Got around 500 hours in it, but an issue I experience every season is that T7 is very easy. But going from T7 to T8 requires serious investment, and some characters need 6,000 FE worth of gear to be able to do T8. I don't know how. But the FE per hour in T7 is abysmal compared to T8. Do you have any plans of smoothing out this section of the game? You've correctly identified that transition from 7 to 8 is designed to be a significant step up in both difficulty and gear requirements. It is intended to be to be the point where the build truly comes online. You start investing more seriously into your endgame setup. However, 6,000 FE figure you mentioned is much higher than our intended target in getting build ready for T8. We're honestly kind of curious how you come up with that figure. Obviously, it was plucked out of his ass, but the point stands, especially for Boom Moto. So Boom Moto, a lot of the T8 requirement gear is not accessible in T7. I think my suggestions of moving T1 affixes down into T7 and, I don't know, doing that rework would solve that problem, but that's pretty much I don't want to say it, but that's basically just telling everyone struggling in T7 to go fuck themselves. That's what that answer's doing in my head. It's intended to be hard. Go fuck yourself. That's how I read that answer. I'm sure they didn't mean it like that, but that's how it reads. Question 15. Would you consider allowing pack spirits to pick up all items displayed? No. The answer to that would be, why have buttons in the game when you can just auto run, auto cast, and just everything's picked up for you? That wouldn't be a fun game. That'd be a shit game. You can already just hold down A and it will auto pick up everything for you. Anyway. Question 16. Why is there a need to have taxes in the game? Why penalize the players? Is there a specific reason for this? Answer, it helps combat inflation. By constantly removing a little bit of currency, we ensure that FE retains its value over time. Without a tax, the total amount of currency in the economy would inflate endlessly, making everything more expensive and devaluing your hard work. It balances different playstyles. Tax helps balance the profit margins between players who primarily want to earn currency by getting drops and those who are heavily involved in high volume trading or flipping items. If there's no tax, then you can just flip shit constantly with no downside. I guess a different type of tax that I'm glad this game doesn't have is a tax every time you list something. I would rather just a set 1/8 of your or 1/10 of your currency is taken. That's much better than at the moment you can list things as many times as you want and it's fine. Imagine a tax where it costs you to put things up instead of when it sells. I think the tax system is currently pretty good and they give you an absolute ton of tax vouchers and that way. And can you imagine the pay to win screams if they removed the tax? There'd be no downside for RMTers to just keep flipping things over and over, switching. Yeah, it'd be horrible. And anyway, Outlaw Crow 1 is the code. No doubt it gives 200 jagged primos. To redeem that, you just press escape, go to redeem code and chuck it in there. Then you go to your mailbox and it's 350 jagged primos. Nice. You don't need to see that. Content creator rewards. But yeah, that's all I've got for this video. Thanks for watching, and I will now make one on this. Cheers.